Thank you for joining us for this News 5 special. I'm Ira Cronin. Today we're taking an in-depth look at the complex and heartbreaking issue of mental illness and teen suicide in our area. According to the El Paso County Coroner's Office, there have been 15 suicides this year in kids between the age of 10 and 17. It's a difficult issue to talk about and deal with because of the stigma attached to suicide. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to hear from a student who survived a close call and how she took the first steps to recovery and overcoming the personal stigma. A mother who lost her son to suicide speaks out and shares the impact it's had on her and her family. We're also going to hear from students and teachers and see how art and creativity is creating unity and awareness on campus. Also, what happens when you call a crisis line or Safe to Tell. Can it really help? Also, the steps being taken in our schools to educate teachers and, more importantly, students about how to recognize the warning signs of depression and suicide and how to step in and help a student in need. And that's where we start with a student in need. Gracie Packard is now a junior at Rampart High School, but once she was that student in desperate times. And Gracie knows firsthand that friends, family, mentors, and proper health care can make all the difference.
Gracie.
A simple note can save a life.
You inspire me to be a better person every day. At the beginning of 8th grade, I got to a place where I was just feeling really hopeless and lost. And I set a date to be my suicide date. I had it all planned out. I had the materials I needed to do it. I was prepared. I had letters written, and it was, if it had gone 2 more days, I don't know if I would still be here.
We spoke with Dr. Scott Poland, an expert on teen suicide clusters and one of the resources District 20 and TCA has brought in to help. Dr. Poland has been clear with parents on how to protect their kids, and while he says it will be nearly impossible to prevent all teen suicides, many of them can be prevented.
Part of the presentations for parents have emphasized really what I would call good parenting in today's world. First of all, finding that shared time when your kid will talk to you, being involved in their lives. Not enough to know the kid's friends, you need to know the kid's friends' parents. Taking charge of what I've referred to as 4 cabinets in her home. The gun cabinet, the liquor cabinet, the medicine cabinet, and the internet cabinet.
It's not enough to know where your kids are going online, but also what they're posting and viewing on social media.
Kids may be posting some very difficult, scary, and traumatic things, and their friends know all about it, but their parents don't.
And there were signs that there was trouble in Gracie's life when she had her suicide plan.
Around the same time, I also had some friends who came and talked to me and really openly confronted me about, hey, something's wrong, and we don't know what, but you need to get help or we're getting help for you.
Gracie turned to her mom for a difficult and honest talk.
On World Suicide Prevention Day of my 8th grade year, I went and talked to my mom, and it was the most terrifying conversation I think I've ever had in my entire life. But I went up to her and I explained to her what was going on, how I was feeling, and I got into more serious therapy. I got diagnosed with the correct mental illnesses, so I was able to get on the correct medication, get into a treatment program that really helped me, and really build this incredible support group of friends and family and mentors and people who loved and cared for me. And it just completely turned my life around.
Which led to treatment for her mental illness. She now has a much larger support system in her life as well.
I still have your orange ribbon on my desk, and daily I think of your courage and strength. Miss Darris is one of my closest friends. She's not just a teacher to me. I love her so much.
When Mrs. Darris, one of Gracie's teachers at Rampart High School, learned another one of her students had attempted suicide, she wrote her a letter that brought an unexpected response.
She couldn't believe that somebody would say such kind things about her, and that she honestly thought that if she was gone, nobody was going to matter, that it wasn't going to make a difference.
What followed were handwritten letters from Miss Darris to all 130 of her students, including Gracie.
You are one of the sweetest people and hardest workers I've ever met. Please stop by next year. She wrote a letter to every single one of her students last year, and that letter is framed in my bedroom, and it just encourages me so much. Words of affirmation and words of, hey, you matter, I see you, you're important, we would miss you, are so encouraging and help so much.
One of the things I hope that will really come across in this interview is that we are never going to plant the idea of suicide in a kid's head. All of our students across the country today at the middle school and high school level all know somebody who's at least talked about it. And I'll quote our Surgeon General, 42,000 suicides a year in this country. We've got to talk about it more. Our homes and our schools and in our churches. What to do if you ever feel this way. There's help available for you.
Now we're going to be hearing more from Gracie throughout the show about when you should try to help a friend who's struggling, how she overcame the personal stigma surrounding mental illness. And if you're struggling with mental illness or suicidal thoughts and don't know where to start, she's going to talk you through the first steps. That's all coming up. But first, a little more about that simple gesture of kindness that meant so much to Gracie from her English teacher at Rampart High School and those handwritten notes to all of her students. It's something that caught our Andy Cohen's eye when a Facebook post about those handwritten notes went viral. Andy?
Ira, all those letters began with one special letter that Brittany Darris wrote to a student that gave her the idea to give all of her kids a personalized thank you. And that student's response helped her realize that a few kind words can be life-saving. It started with parent-teacher conferences. The mother of a student who'd been absent a few weeks came in with a list of teacher names and the words yes or no.
She had asked her daughter if she felt comfortable sharing the story and sharing why she'd been absent. And so that was the yes and the no, as teachers that you can tell and teachers that you probably shouldn't say something to.
The mom explained the police had stopped her daughter from committing suicide after getting a safe-to-tell tip.
And we were both in tears. And it just made me realize that something needs to be done to make these kids realize that they're special.
Darris asked for permission to write the student a personal letter, and the mom agreed. But it was the girl's reaction that motivated her to take things further.
That she couldn't believe that somebody would say such kind things about her, and that she honestly thought that if she was gone, nobody was going to matter, that it wasn't going to make a difference.
So she went to work, handwriting personal letters to all 130 of her students. She even had to put off grading some essays to get the work all done in time.
Bree, you were the student I brag about to all of my friends.
Bree Withier said the students got their letters after finishing finals this week.
I was just, first of all, surprised by how much she wrote. Because usually when people write letters, it's like one or two sentences, like either happy birthday or Merry Christmas.
Darris didn't tell the classes at the time why she'd written the letters, but later put a post on Facebook giving the backstory. That post went viral.
I've gotten some of the most amazing emails and shares that people are putting on Facebook, and I can scroll through and see what people are saying. They're spreading the positivity.
Proving that a pen and paper and some genuine words of gratitude can still be powerful. By the way, that post has been shared, Ira, more than 193,000 times. That's since our story aired earlier this year. And Ms. Darris, she's gotten notes and messages of support from total strangers all across the country.
Yeah, you know, so many of people in our education system are well-intentioned. They want the best for these kids. But what is it that's different about Ms. Darris, do you think?
You know, and I think it really was that experience, but it's just taking action and saying something from the heart, you know, just connecting as human beings again. It's something that maybe we're missing in the digital era. It's good that it was on a pen and paper.
Yeah, and she knows her kids too. I know that's one thing Gracie mentioned to me, that it wasn't just a, I appreciate you. There were specifics about Gracie that only applied to her.
That's right.
Yep. Thank you, Andy. Great
bet.
story. It's worth noting that other people have noticed Ms. Darris' efforts as well. She was honored in October of this year at the annual Heroes of Mental Health Luncheon for helping her students cope and for providing those lines of communication to teens who might be in trouble, letting them know that help is available. She told us then what she's doing is something we can all do.
People need to know that no matter who they're talking to, it's important to be compassionate. And they need to continue to check in on people that they surround themselves with every day so that they know that those people are safe and that they're taken care of.
The Heroes of Mental Health event is sponsored by Aspen Point. Also this week, Colorado Springs Mayor John Suthers named Ms. Darris the mayor's young leader in innovative education for 2016. Well, coming up on News 5, students coping with mental health issues through and thoughts of suicide and the loss of classmates through art at 2 local high schools. And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, mental illness, or depression, you can call the Colorado Crisis and Support Line at 844-493-TALK or Safe to Tell Colorado at 1-877-542-7233. Thank you for watching this important News 5 special Teen Suicide starting the conversation. You know, tackling the tough and often disturbing issue of teen suicide and really starting the conversation to help our kids is tough. Well, today we want to tell you about one of the ways students are taking a stand against bullying and suicide and the loss of classmates, all through artwork. At Lewis Palmer High School in Monument, News 5's Lena Howland discovered a project that's making a difference. Lena?
Earlier this month, for a week at Lewis Palmer High School, all students were given the chance to see some very powerful artwork made by their classmates. The artists tell News 5 this experience has been somewhat of a cathartic outlet for them.
When I sit in here, it kind of brings back good memories, but like bad memories, but
Victimization, isolation, death, and resilience.
to become more resilient, one must regain confidence and stay confident in who they are, despite what is occurring around them.
Made by hand to take a stand against bullying and suicide, something Brooke Sheffield knows all too well.
I started getting really bad anxiety and social anxiety. So going to school was really hard for me because I didn't want to talk to anybody and I didn't want to be alive either.
But this project puts her past in its place.
Some of these pieces really show the pain of people and how hurt they are. And I feel that pain for them and I just want to help in any way that I can, so that's why I put this together.
And Brooke wasn't alone.
Probably the worst experience ever.
Macy Bennett transferred to Lewis Palmer after losing 2 close friends to suicide earlier this year.
It just kept going and going and going, and it didn't stop. And it felt like it was never going to stop.
Now at a new school, she's working past it.
It kind of brought the pain out, and I was able to put it into some art.
Call it her new happy place.
We're trying to help kids to not feel, hopeless.
Stephanie Crow, the art teacher that put it all together, says addressing these issues is more important now than ever before.
Suicide, it is happening. Teens are committing suicide based on bullying. And so I feel like, this hopefully will help kids to realize that there's hope.
The hope is that this art show will help more students realize that they are not alone.
We're hoping this is a meaningful type of project that really will continue, into the lives of these kids.
Now, because of the positive response Mrs. Crow has seen from this art show and the safe place that she's been able to create, she tells us she is now planning similar projects for her students every semester.
Yeah, great story. Great that those kids opened up. As you were there looking at the art and talking to them, what really stuck out to you the most?
I mean, really what stuck out to me was that when I sat down to talk to each of these students, they just poured their hearts out. And that was kind of the point of this art project, as to be sort of a cathartic release for these students, and in such a safe environment where they knew that so many of the other students were going through the same thing.
Yeah. Well, getting them to the place where it's a comfortable discussion doesn't mean we normalize it, but to get it out there is so important. Awesome.
Absolutely. And there's also an art display through the halls at Discovery Canyon campus called Keep Swimming.
Yeah, there at Discovery Canyon, in the wake of the tragedies, it was one small way of unifying the student body in the campus. They also have likely set a world record in the process.
I call it the koi fish installation. It's just kind of a demonstration of resiliency and unity on the campus, and it's all about us being together, and it's all about our differences and our likeness.
The project is something that nearly the entire student body, kindergarten through 12th grade, is behind.
Even the friends that thought it was too cool or didn't like the idea, they embraced it, they made a fish, and now they look back and people are all looking for their fish. Everyone wants to see the little fish and the really, really big fish, the super creative fish. There's some art kids that went all out.
Even parents have made fish and volunteered to hang them in the halls.
This is awesome because it is unifying the entire campus. Very super unique that we're a K through 12 campus, and have always loved that. And this just is a visual representation of exactly that.
The idea began when middle school art teacher Shell Acker was surfing Pinterest.
But we just wanted to show the kids we're here, we're together, we're collaborating. We're one big school of fish. I know that sounds kind of hokey, but we're in this together. So logistically, that's kind of a big deal to get all of that to happen.
Tiffany Hawk, the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program Coordinator, helped it all come together.
That started with a very enthusiastic art teacher. I saw their enthusiasm and how they saw the art project going forward, and of course, the answer was yes.
And now what began as an art project is a symbol of hope and unity.
When I see the fish in the hallways, it just reminds me what a great campus we are and what a unified campus we are. Each one of them is different and each one of them is unique, and they're just like our kids.
You're not swimming ahead or behind, but you're just swimming with, and that's the message to leave our kids, is you are not alone.
It's such a simple act. It's just some paper fish lining a hallway, but there's so much depth. Koi travel upstream together. We're all in this together. We're all traveling forward. None of us are going backward.
Now, the current world record for a continuous paper animal art display is 2,502 feet, and the koi fish at Discovery Canyon come in at 3,608 feet. They're now sending off certified letters and documentation to Guinness, and we should find out sometime in 2017 whether they've officially set that world record. Well, still ahead, how can you help a friend in need who's made you promise not to tell anybody, or if you think someone's in trouble and you're not sure who to tell to get them help? Susan Payne, the founder of Safe to Tell, is in studio to share with us exactly how Safe to Tell works. And remember, if somebody you know, or if you yourself are struggling with suicidal thoughts, mental illness, or depression, you can call the Colorado Crisis and Support Line at 844-493-TALK or Safe to Tell Colorado 877-542-7233. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News 5 and our special Teen Suicide, Starting the Conversation. You know, we hope you can use this special program to educate your kids so that they can recognize when one of their friends or other students are in trouble, and more so to know what to do about it. Now, as you've seen throughout this special so far, Gracie Packard has struggled herself, and now she has this advice for kids who know someone's in trouble, but they made them promise to keep it quiet.
It's really scary to talk to somebody about it when you know you have a friend who's going through this, because there's this fear of making them angry, or this fear that it may not be as bad as it actually is, and that maybe they're just over-exaggerating or looking for attention, and so you don't want to make it a big deal. But the thing is, it's a matter of making it a big deal when it's not, or choosing to push it aside and then waking up the next morning and knowing your friend isn't there. It's way worth making them mad, even if they're mad at you for months. In the end, it is better to have them upset with you than to not have them in your life at all. And whenever I talk to somebody who has lost a friend due to suicide and mental illness, that is their biggest regret, is the fact that they didn't take that step and talk to somebody about it when they saw warning signs, because either you talk to them and you talk to them, a trusted adult, or you run the risk of not ever getting to talk to them again.
Well, Safe to Tell is one of the easiest ways for our kids to anonymously help a friend who might be in need. Susan Payne, you're the founder of Safe to Tell, and you're currently working with Safe Schools out of the Attorney General's office. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Certainly by this point, most people have heard of Safe to Tell, but just as a quick reminder, what is it?
Safe to Tell is an anonymous way for young people to speak up. We're really trying to engage them in conversations so that in their mind they know what to do if they're faced with a situation that endangers their safety or the safety of others, and really go into it with the mindset, I know what I would do if I was faced with this situation, and I'd either call 911 or I'd tell an adult, but if I was afraid of speaking up for whatever reason, I know that there's a safe, anonymous way to speak up, and that this person will get the help that they need, or that people will take it very seriously.
For a long time, it was just a hotline, but now I know about 8 months ago you were here talking to us about the app.
Right.
How's that's being received? Is it being used more than phone calls now? And just talk about that new way to report.
Social norms have really changed with young people, and the data proves it. So we trended this school year, we've trended with some months 80% of reports were made through an online mechanism. So that's a combination of using the mobile app to make a report, where they can upload a photo or a video, there's no size restriction, or using a mobile device to access the online reporting system, or using a PC. So we know that at least 70% or more of the time, that's the preferred method for young people to speak up.
So when it comes to monthly breakdown, where do suicide concerns fall in terms of, up against bullying or gun violence, all the things that Safe to Tell can help with?
You know, the data really shows us what's trending, and the number one thing last school year alone that was reported by our young people was a friend that was suicidal, followed by bullying, substance abuse, and then there was cutting or a friend that's depressed. So we really are looking at the fact that there's a lot of hurting kids out there, and that there are young people that are very aware about the situation around them, the situation that's occurring on social media. And when they speak up like that, I hope that everyone knows how sophisticated the layers of protection are. That means if we need to coordinate with crisis response counselors to dialogue with that person, if they're sending us photos, it immediately is going to a committed group of adults at the local school level or at the local responder level, law enforcement or emergency responders.
Yeah. So okay, so a kid uses the app and they make a report. What can they expect? Do they hear nothing back? Are they truly anonymous?
They are truly anonymous. I get that all the question, like, you really know who they are.
Right, you really know, but you're not telling.
I'm not telling. It's just Susan Payne knows.
Right,
but
you
law,
really don't.
I really don't. Neither does the comm center. It is an anonymous encrypted system, so it comes through. We do not know who is reporting. The law protects that person and enables them to make a report because we know there's barriers. The barriers are what have cost us so many lives. We can look in hindsight at these cases and know if someone had spoken up. School shootings is a good example. 4 out of 5 times there was a young person that knew and failed to report it. And that is hard to stomach. And I believe that's the same, it may be even more, for a friend that knows that somebody's hurting or has made a threat to hurt themselves or someone else is a very likely occurrence.
So finally, what would you say to a kid or to a parent who's talking to their kid about this? Yeah. Their kid has concerns, but they're not sure how legitimate they are. Are they going to be in trouble if they report it and it's a false alarm? Or I guess maybe when shouldn't they report?
The chief and sheriff, we were at the youth advisory group, and that was 2 students from every high school in the county and city. And they were amazing because they asked, well, how do I know if I should say something? What if I'm not sure it's real? And the number one thing is you don't have to decide if it's real. But if your gut instinct is this person is making a threat to hurt themselves or someone else, your number one thing is to acknowledge what they're telling you, care about them, but you have to tell. You need to tell an adult that you trust. You can call 911. If you fear retaliation or that it might be the betrayal to tell, then Safe to Tell is an anonymous way to speak up, and the people that do that are no less courageous. We see lives saved every single day because some hero spoke up and there was a response by adults and a life was saved.
Well, managing their social media is so important. The more you can involve yourself as a parent. And maybe a great idea is when you give your kid that cell phone, say, and put this Safe to Tell app right on it and just kind of put it there and get them in.
And feel confident. What we have is recently one of our cases involved a girl that had posted a picture of herself and there was alcohol and a weapon involved. And when law enforcement got to her home, she wasn't there. So we have the layers to say, okay, how do we, at the law enforcement level, find out where that picture was taken? She was found passed out unconscious in a hotel, and her life was saved. And we can overcome that. Parents can talk to her, there's help, but she's alive. And that's because there's a hero out there that made that report.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Susan Payne, thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
When we come back, a mother who lost her son to suicide just a couple of months ago shares her story and its impact on her and her family and community. It's a tragedy she hopes no other parent, sibling, or student will have to go through. Stay with us. Glad you're with us for this KOAA News 5 special, Teen Suicide, starting the conversation, taking a closer look at the issue of mental illness and teen suicide in our area. It's had a tremendous impact in Colorado Springs and in Academy School District 20 most recently, where my kids go to school. You know, going back to last year at Discovery Canyon campus, for my daughter, it began with the loss of a classmate, then a friend, then a closer friend, and then earlier this year, the very closest of friends at the Classical Academy. Each of these events has had a significant impact on not only my daughter, but our entire family. Noah Wilder spent time in our home over this summer. Great kid, very close with my 16-year-old. We're friends with Noah's mom, Nicole, who, when she spoke at her son's memorial service in September, had a clear message to the kids in attendance that her son had made a mistake that he could not undo, and that this cluster of teen suicides has to stop.
Noah was my son. Noah is Avery's big brother. Noah is Aaron's little brother. We were the Wilders. We still are the Wilders. He's definitely one that could make our family laugh. He definitely was a very funny kid. He was definitely a light in our family.
But for a couple of years, Nicole knew her son was also battling depression and worse.
In 9th grade is when it really came to ahead for me, and I really got involved, making sure that he, had therapy. He was hospitalized for thoughts of suicide. He described them as dark thoughts. It was very hard for him to explain in words.
Dr. Scott Poland is an expert on teen suicide clusters and one of the resources that District 20 and TCA has brought in to help.
And unfortunately, a lot of young people are at risk. There's certainly a contagion factor to youth suicide. They are the one age group most likely to imitate suicidal behavior.
In Noah Wilder's case, he was close friends with one of the students from Discovery Canyon who completed suicide in May.
One of his friends died by suicide a few months earlier, and it was devastating to Noah. He was so devastated. He didn't understand why. I talked to Noah quite a bit. He told me that he felt this way. Noah definitely told me he did not want to die. But I go back to the impulse.
A young person who died by suicide actually traveled a very long road. There was no one thing, there was no one person to blame. But for the death to actually happen, a lot of things have to go wrong at one time. Meaning they've had the plan, but there may be a precipitating event, which most often involves a severe argument with a peer, severe argument with a parent, maybe an extreme humiliation or a discipline problem.
Nicole says Noah's impulse was, as Dr. Poland says, in response to a precipitating event. His mom says Noah had gotten in trouble at school on a Friday.
It really was not anything to be alarmed about, other than when you get in trouble, there's a consequence. We had gone to therapy. We had communicated about what had happened. I clearly talked to him about it's okay. Noah was very fragile. He seemed to be functioning fine, as always, but that's mental illness for you. It got to the point where Monday morning comes around and he had left the home in the middle of the night. And I feel that he just didn't want to face this, and that was his impulse right there.
Noah went to the TCA campus in the early morning hours that next Monday, where he completed his suicide without anyone knowing.
And if I could do it over again, I just want to, explain to him that it's okay. There's not a person out there that hasn't made mistakes. But I go back to how children are impulsive. And that was his impulsive move.
The impact is really difficult. It's like taking a rock and throwing it into a pond. Every time there's a youth suicide, there's a ripple effect in the schools, the community, and in our homes. And really, it's a scary time for our schools and our communities.
Every morning that I wake up, it's the first thought that I have, is that he's gone. My daughter can't go to school. His other half, his older brother, Aaron, he's been going to school, but it's very sporadic. He's a senior this year. He talks about how he doesn't want to go to college. I'm working from home now just to stay here with my children when they need it.
Sean Shields was Noah's principal at TCA.
It's a tragedy. It's horrible. It's the worst news you can probably get as a principal. I don't even know any other way to describe it. It's just horrible. You don't really know the impact. We still don't know the impact. We still don't know the entire impact of something like that. It starts at the the friend group, the kids who were closest to the student, but then it quickly ripples out from there. You've got the students who are familiar with those students, you've got parents, you've got kids at other schools, and you really find out about it as you go.
David King is an assistant principal at Discovery Canyon High School, where they're also dealing with the same issue.
I don't feel like it's just a DCC issue. We were the unfortunate school that had a significant cluster last year and went through something that I would hope that no one else would ever have to go through. That no group of students, that no community would have to go through. It was extremely painful, but it's definitely not a north end of Colorado Springs specific issue. We're seeing this across the country with this generation.
When it comes to teen suicide, Dr. Poland points to 4 clear warning signs.
The warning signs are really talking about death and dying, giving away of prized possessions, making out at will, and dramatic changes in behavior that might have to do with things like sleeping patterns or even eating.
Complicating the issue, as any parent knows, is that teens can be very hard to read. Dr. Poland says the difference between typical teen moodiness and clear warning signs are behaviors that are pervasive. They affect every aspect of their life, family, school, friendships. Second, are the behaviors persistent, lasting for more than 2 or 3 weeks? And finally, have the kids stop doing the things that they enjoy or love doing most? Now, one message everybody that I spoke with for this story feels very strongly about is mental illness and teen suicide must be discussed with our kids.
We've got to talk about it more, our homes and our schools and in our churches. What to do if you ever feel this way. There's help available for you.
Kids are aware. Students, have been continually asking us to not skirt around the subject, to address it head on. They said, we need to talk about it. We're ready to talk about it. We need to know what we can do to help.
My greatest hope, I guess, is that it's no longer something that people are afraid to talk about, that we're able to have open conversations about it. And of course, I hope this never happens again. That would be my greatest hope. But I just want it to be something that people are comfortable talking about, that they're not afraid. It's not seen as a stigma.
This broke me. This broke our family. And I'm not saying that we won't come back, but it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. My only hope is that there is some awareness. I love to talk about him. I like to think good memories of him, but sometimes it makes me cry because I miss him. Our family definitely lost a key member. I don't think we'll ever be the same. I think that we'll learn to become something else, but right now it just feels like a void in our family. And like I said, we had a very loud family, and it's very quiet right now.
Dr. Poland tells me that grief associated with suicide is the most complex form of grief there is. We should mention, since we spoke with Nicole for this story, that Noah's sister Avery has returned to class. As for Nicole, she's in the process of becoming as involved in suicide prevention as she can. She hopes that through her tragedy and her family's tragedy, good can come from it. The Jason Flatt Act is one thing she's looking into through the Jason Foundation that gets more education into the classrooms and in the hands of teachers. There are also many resources out there, including Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention here in our area. All right, joining us now in studio, Janet Carnes, Executive Director of Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're on the front lines. You deal firsthand with people like Nicole, people who have suffered this terrible loss. What's the big message we need in our community right now? Because there has been an awful lot out there.
Right. I think everyone needs to know that we need to take all talk of suicide seriously. Don't assume that if someone's talking about it, they're not serious. They can be. I think people need to start reaching out to each other and connecting more. And I think that's part of the issue that we need to address. I think people need to attend trainings and learn how to prevent suicides. We do that for free.
Right.
So people need to, I think, get trained. And I think people need to just really be aware of how people are doing and not assume things.
Yeah. Well, what can be done in general terms to prevent youth suicide or suicide in general, for that matter?
All suicides we know certain things about. One is that people who die by suicide are in great pain, and that usually they actually don't want to die. They just find the pain too hard to live with. And so that's what we look for, and that's what we try to train people to look for. So that, to me, is part of the issue, I think, of what needs to be done right now. I think parents need to really start kind of watching their children a little more. We know from teens that we talk to a great deal that social media is a big problem.
Yeah.
And that, so there's lots of things going on that parents don't know about. And when it's teenagers, it can be really difficult to monitor your children's social media.
Right.
But kids themselves tell us, you know, we want to have conversations with our parents, but we want to have really deep conversations, or real ones. And they don't want their parents to like freak out easily over the social media issue, but they know they need some help with it.
Yeah. So we've heard an awful lot about warning signs, but you certainly, again, you deal with this every day. So in your opinion, what are some of the key warning signs that parents can be looking for?
One of the big ones are hopelessness and helplessness. So people who die by suicide feel very hopeless. So with teenagers or anyone, we look for changes in behavior. So someone who is normally, let's say, outgoing, talkative, and all of a sudden they become quiet and withdrawn. Now, if you have a kid that normally is kind of isolated themselves, you know, kind of quiet child, once again, look for a child who now starts spending all their time in the room, doesn't come down for dinner. Just any kind of real behavioral changes. Somebody who used to be a safe person now all of a sudden starts taking risk. Things like that. So we really go for changes in behaviors. Sometimes it's giving away possessions, not always, but usually people will make indirect or direct statements about suicide. Indirect, I just can't take it anymore, you won't have to worry about me soon, or it might be very direct of, I've decided to kill myself. And so people need to become comfortable asking the question of, are you thinking of suicide? And saying it very directly.
Yeah.
And making sure we're all on the same page about this.
And is it the stigma, really, of thinking, well, I don't want to put this in my kid's head? What do you think prevents people from having that direct conversation?
Well, it can be a difficult conversation, and that's why we try to train you that we can make it easier for you. It is stigma. It's also parents don't want to think that their children would be in that place. Right. And so to look for that too. You know, if you've had children that were on medication, all of a sudden they stop taking it. A child who all of a sudden starts acting real depressed, starts staying away from their friends, quit enjoying their normal activities. So just really look for those changes, that sense of hopelessness, helplessness, and that great feeling of pain.
Yeah. Well, finally, you know, one of the big messages we hope to get out is to parents to share with their kids, or maybe to kids, to watch for trouble in their friends. So clearly a lot of things that I know on your website, there's crisis lines. So we've got the Colorado crisis line.
Right.
But what is the importance of actually taking some kind of step, calling a crisis line, or Safe to Tell, or doing something? Why is that important?
Well, because teenagers will often tell other teenagers, their friends, that they're thinking of this, but they don't tell the adults. And so that's what we really encourage them. Call a crisis line, tell a trusted adult, and that might be your parents, it might be grandparents, it might be a police officer or fireman, you know, it could be someone like yourself, just anyone, and keep telling until someone takes you serious. So we want people to call crisis lines. Our organization for 17 years ran a crisis line, but we now send ours to the Colorado crisis line. And it's important, and we train and tell people, you can call a crisis line if you're worried about a friend. If you've got a friend with you and they've said, yes, I'm thinking of suicide, you don't know what to say, we'll tell you what to say. We will coach you through that. Yeah. And so it's really important, too, that they tell someone so that they're not left later, if someone completes or attempts, with that guilt. Guilt, I should have said something, I should have done something. And I hear that a lot. That a lot of teenagers have a lot of guilt because I wish I would have said something, I wish I would have known. Things like that. So it's important to call crisis lines. They're available 24/7. They're confidential, they're free, and you can also text them. So it covers all the avenues.
Janet Carnes, thank you so much
for
being with you. Appreciate it. Now, throughout today's special on News 5, we hope to help you start the conversation with your kids, community school, or keep the conversation going to help erase the stigma that surrounds mental health and teen suicide. Now, maybe you're wondering, how can you get that done? Well, Gracie Packard knows because she's done it.
It was just a matter of talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. There used to be a huge sense of embarrassment and shame around it. I was so scared of being known as the drugged up girl because I was on medication for my mental illness. I was in therapy twice a week, and I was so scared of people judging me for that. But once I started being honest about it and sharing my story, I shared my story for the first time in September of last year fully. I made a blog post about it on social media, And the amount of positive encouragement I got from it was amazing. And I think to get rid of the stigma, we just have to be comfortable talking about it. And we have to be aware that it's not something that we should be ashamed of. But mental illness, we try to avoid. We try to think, oh, if we talk about this, people are going to get offended. But by doing that, it just makes kids feel like it has to be kept secret. And by being honest and by being vulnerable, it's scary at first, but every single time you share your struggles and share what you're going through, the stigma goes away a little bit more and it gets a little bit less scary to talk about because you realize that there is way more support than there is shame.
Still ahead, does the altitude here in Colorado have anything to do with the high rates of depression and suicide? There's a controversial theory that says yes. We'll tell you about that and what local experts have to say about it. And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, mental illness, or depression, you can call the Colorado Crisis Support Line, 844-493-TALK, 8255, or Safe to Tell Colorado. Our state is consistently ranked near the top of the list when it comes to depression and suicide. And it's something that we wanted to address in today's special, Teen Suicide, Starting the Conversation. A group of researchers thinks our high altitude might play a role here. Our Kelsey Kennedy looked into their research and also talked with local experts to see what they have to say about it. Kelsey?
Higher depression and suicide rates certainly aren't just a Colorado problem, but is there really a correlation between thin air and higher suicide rates? As I found out, it hasn't necessarily been a popular theory.
It's interesting research, absolutely. I feel that we do need to do more research on why people commit suicide.
The study was published in 2011 in the American Journal of Psychiatry. It also took into account gun ownership, population density, poverty, health insurance, and available psychiatric care. But researchers say of all the factors, altitude had the strongest link to suicide. The theory hasn't gained much traction. Interesting, yes, but a hard sell to some that work with patients every day.
Saying that one area of the brain causes a person to commit suicide, I don't necessarily agree with. I don't believe there's a direct correlation between the two. I think that a lot of factors go into play when somebody takes their life, either internal or external.
Others say the 20 years of death data from the CDC that was compiled in the study is too compelling to ignore.
So I don't think it's the only cause, but I think it could be one piece of the puzzle, and I don't think we should discount that.
2013 numbers from the CDC rank Colorado 8th in the nation for the highest suicide rates. That's down from previous years. But don't run for the coasts just yet. The same states that rank high on the list are on top of another polar opposite list, Gallup's poll of the happiest states. It all boils down to chemistry. The research, led by a scientist from the University of Utah, suggests that oxygen levels at altitude have an impact on our individual brain chemistry. The lack of oxygen, according to the study, leads to a drop in serotonin, a neurotransmitter that helps stabilize emotions. Researchers found that thin air also leads to a rise in dopamine, which is often associated with the pleasure center of the brain. As the theory goes, people predisposed to mental illness are more likely to develop a mood disorder because they're more sensitive to decreasing serotonin levels at high altitudes. On the flip side, those without a predisposition are less likely to be depressed and feel happier as the brain produces more dopamine. The fluctuation of these chemicals, combined with alcohol, drugs, and antidepressants, can create a competition inside the brain.
When you take marijuana and you put that on top of a psychotropic medication, you're not getting the effect that you want from that psychotropic medication. So that could be causing more depression and more suicidal thoughts in someone who's already depressed.
Researchers suggest understanding how altitude might affect the brain could eventually be used to help prevent suicide, and local experts remain committed to each person's unique situation and needs.
I think most people are looking for an easy answer. And so we're all trying to pin one thing on what causes suicide. And suicide is actually a very complicated issue. And there's never usually one cause.
Now there's another group that tracks these numbers besides the CDC, the American Association of Suicidology. Here's how their most recent data ranks Colorado against other states with the highest suicide rates. In 2012, we jumped from 9th to 5th, down to 7th in 2013, back up to 5th in 2014.
So Kelsey, this is a separate group, but how do these numbers compare with what the CDC has been reporting?
Well, they're very close. 2013, for example, the CDC had a 6th highest suicide rate in the nation, where the American Association of Suicidology had us at 5th. We are consistently in the top 10, but we have not reached above that 5th spot.
Haven't cracked the top 5, but interestingly, Montana and Wyoming consistently right there in the top 2. Any explanation?
Yeah, those 2 states are actually tied for the very top spot. Interestingly, they both have higher altitudes than most states, and while there are overall less suicides in those states, if you account for population per capita, that suicide rate is what puts them at the very top.
Yeah, very complex issue. Thank you, Kelsey. Well, suicide prevention also top of mind for our governor, John Hickenlooper, this year. His plan earned rousing applause during his State of the State address. The goal to make mental health help as easy as access to a primary care physician. Augustine Vega works with Pueblo's chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI. Now, he found the support group while struggling with his daughter's mental health problems.
One of the things that I was really ignorant about, because I had this Hollywood view of what mental illness was like, and it's scary and it's the end of the line type of thing, but it's not.
NAMI is one of the only resources for mental illness in the Pueblo community, along with Spanish Peaks, and a local teen suicide prevention hotline. Vega hopes the governor's plan will bring more help to those who are contemplating suicide across southern Colorado. Well, besides bringing in national experts like Dr. Scott Poland and Dr. Richard Lieberman, who will continue to provide webinars to District 20 and TCA, administrators that I spoke with for this special at Discovery Canyon and TCA are also taking specific steps right now to try to provide help and support to staff and students.
We want to make sure we're always relational, that we're taking care of the hearts of our students. We've got a task force that's got administrators and counselors in place that are looking at different programs. We've done some staff training, more focused on suicide and suicide prevention, which we weren't doing before. We were kind of doing overall mental health. I feel like we had some good systems in place before, because obviously schools have a number of suicide threats every year, and you evaluate students and you do interventions, and most of the time those interventions are successful. Right now our awareness is really high, so more than probably it would typically be when kids are expressing academic concerns, stress about homework. We quickly get adults involved in that.
We're doing a lot of work with our staff. We're doing some emotional intelligence training and just practicing being aware of our own emotions, and by doing that as a staff, then we're able to serve our students better too and have a greater level of awareness of how they're doing, how we're impacting them, and vice versa. Well, we're using a curriculum that's been adopted by the district. It's called the SOS program. It stands for the Signs of Suicide, and I actually was observing our counselors this week, so I sat in about 3 or 4 sessions of that and got to offer them feedback and participate with students. So we're implementing that curriculum. It's a research-based curriculum that has been shown to have a very positive impact in helping equip students on how to serve other students when they're seeing those concerns or those warning signs.
And Mr. King there, the assistant principal at Discovery Canyon High School, has been working on the forefront of this issue really for years. And just like Ms. Darris, who we saw earlier in the program, goes out of his way to connect with students, even through forms of communication more on the kids' level.
This is my 6th school year at Discovery Canyon, but right when I got here, I noticed a significant increase in the amount of suicide assessments that we were having to do and the amount of suicidal ideations that we were seeing in students and just mental health concerns. So I wanted to have an outreach to students, and I wanted to let them know that I had a personal investment in their life and health and well-being. And there was kind of a fad on the internet at that time where kids were showing these flip chart card things to communicate a powerful message set to some music. So I decided, I can do that. And so I just sat down and communicated a quick message that I wanted to send to students, and they received it really well, and it helped me to build, just to advance my relationships with them more quickly, because I think they saw my heart in it.
Oftentimes the hardest part, if you're struggling with depression or thoughts of suicide, or you know of someone who is, the hardest part is taking that first step towards getting help. It's a path that Gracie Packard has successfully traveled herself, and she has this advice.
The biggest thing is just to take that first step. The first step is the scariest. It's terrifying. It is, knee-shaking scary to say for the first time that, hey, I'm not okay. just because there is this huge stigma around it. But the minute you say that, every single time after that gets so much easier. And taking that first step, it's just after that it becomes so easy and so natural to be able to discuss it. And I think the biggest thing is you will be blown away by the amount of support and love there is out there. There are so many people out there who want to help and support and provide love. Then there are people who are going to be upset with you. And if you're willing to take that risk, you're going to see the amount of love that there is for you.
You know, the fact is, teenagers, most of them are just learning what many of us adults have come to accept. Life can be challenging. It can get you down. Depression and mental illness don't always mean that a person is suicidal. But the point is, there's help for you no matter how you're feeling. You just have to reach out for it. We here at KOAA News 5 will continue to watch out for you and keep this conversation going on this issue. I want to thank everybody who courageously spoke with us on this difficult topic. Thank you for being with us. Remember, stay safe, look out for each other. I'm Ira Cronin.